BioBalance Healthcast, Episode 138, Senate Bill 959, Part 1.
BioBalance Healthcast features conversations about positive aging. Your hosts are Dr. Kathy Maupin, Medical Director of BioBalance Health and a leading expert in treating symptoms of aging, and Brett Newcomb, a licensed professional counselor.
We are talking today about being an informed and participatory consumer and being an informed and participatory citizen in this great democracy of ours. And the reason that we're talking about it, we've done in the past a number of conversations about compounding pharmacies, about medicines, about the FDA and the DEA and the rules and regulatory procedures as they have impacted Kathy's business or as they've impacted the lives of our patients from information that we have from our patients. And there's a lot in the news that requires our awareness and gets lost in the shuffle of day-to-day news. For instance, this week, Kathy's office received a letter from the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, saying as a pronouncement, a regulatory pronouncement, the way that she and the pharmacies that she works with have been doing business no longer is allowed and must immediately stop, and they have to find a different way to do it. And it caused a lot of panic in the office, and they had to spend a lot of time calling and making contact and doing research to find out how can we go forward in a way
that's legal,
that's legal,
and
that allows us to continue.
Usually, there's
to
another way to do it besides what they tell you. They tell you you have to do this. The DEA should not have much to do with normal pharmaceuticals. They have to do with controlled substances. So this all hinges on testosterone being a controlled substance. So that's my first problem with it. Testosterone's a hormone. It's a natural hormone. It's a hormone that we all have and that we are just replacing. So how can that be controlled? Why is it controlled? Is it because people misuse it? It has to be given by a prescription. So a physician has to watch over the patient, write the prescription, or order the medication into the office, which we all do.
And there are horror stories. I mean, there are stories about physicians who don't act in a responsible way. Michael Jackson's physician,
right?
Elvis Presley's physician.
That's like 1% or less of the physicians in the United States.
Right.
So it's the people who don't behave, that don't follow the rules, that aren't taking good care of their patients, that are being dangerous. But that's not the majority of the people who are doctors. I mean, it takes a lot to be a doctor. It takes a lot of ethical training. It takes a lot of ethics, actually, to be a doctor. Your doctor has a lot of ethics, even if they aren't personable. They have ethics of being, it doesn't mean you're a nice, sweet, kind, loving. You should be if you're a physician, but you may not be. That's not a requirement, but it is a requirement that you be ethical. And there are a few doctors that aren't, but just like anything else, the majority of the people that are physicians and go through all those years of training are ethical and want to do the right thing. So we want to follow the rules. But we have to balance that with the needs of our patients. And our patients have needs. We need to get our patients exactly what they need to be healthy.
Well, but when you say you want to follow the rules, part of the problem that we have is that the federal government is a multi-headed hydra. There are multiple federal agencies that play a role in the production, regulation, distribution of foods and medicines. And so you have the DEA that sends this letter, you have the FDA, you have the Secretary of Health and Human Services, all who have some regulatory capacity, and they don't all talk to each other. They don't have consistent databases. One will make a decision in their little bailiwick that is a domino effect in the decisions of others' bailiwicks, and they don't talk to each other. And so as a consumer, as a physician, as a pharmacy or a business person trying to participate in the commerce of medical supply, this becomes a huge deal.
In the recent past, they've made most medications that you have to order into your office to have on hand in case someone needs it, to be something that you can't order into your office for a supply. They don't want us to have medications in our office, but
like epinephrine. If I came to I had a bee sting and I came to your office and said I need something, I'm going into shop.
It takes a
You
huge.
have to then send out one for me.
I have to send you to a pharmacy while you're, maybe going into shock if I don't have it. However, they do allow us to have locked heart attack kits, which we all have, or we're all supposed to have, that have epinephrine in it. But to get an epinephrine pen, I had to get one for a friend at church who had lost his, and we were going on a church trip.
Right.
And so I had to go through all the hoops to get an epinephrine pen in his name.
Right.
But I paid for it so I could take it to him, and I'm a physician, so I can take the drug to him.
Right.
But you can't imagine the time and effort it took just to get that pen so that he could be in Colorado and not die of a bee sting. So it was one of those things where if he didn't have a doctor coming, he couldn't have
Able
gone
to
on the trip.
facilitate that.
He would
He
have had to
couldn't
come
go.
home.
Yeah.
So that's one of those things where I got to go through the paperwork and the red tape and all the difficulty. And then it was for one epinephrine pen, and epinephrine's cheap, it was about $250.
Wow.
So that's a lot. I mean, that's a lot to keep you alive if you get stung. So in any case, not only are we limited by cost, we're limited by red tape, we're limited by what we can do. I used to be able to order in all kinds of different medications, antibiotics. I can still do some of that, but then we're limited by insurance won't cover it, or patients would have to pay for it. So that's a huge issue.
The question there is that an insurance regulation or a government regulation? For instance, I called about a renewal of a prescription the other day because I'm going to be out of town, and the pharmacist looked it up, and they have to check. I mean, the pharmacy has to keep a computer file that tells them, say you're the physician that prescribes your information, but also the insurance information, and they got to cross-check the calendars. You wrote the prescription for how many, for how long, and the insurance has to look. And so what she told me was, you had that prescription filled on the, say, 19th of last month. You can't get it again until the 13th of this month.
And what they really meant was your insurance won't pay for it.
Right. Yeah, you can get it.
But if it's an inexpensive drug, and you can afford it, then you can get it, because by law, if I wrote the prescription and it's renewed every 30 days, then you can get it a few days ahead of time if it's not a controlled substance.
And if I'm willing to pay for it.
Right, but if it's controlled, say you have ADD medicine, or, gosh, I mean, that's a God
huge
forbid,
one right now.
because so many people really do need ADD medicine, and now they're finding other uses for ADD medicine, like people falling asleep when they drive. I think that's important that they should get an amphetamine, which is a controlled substance, to keep them awake while they're driving home so no one gets killed.
Right.
But they make them jump through so many hoops that if you have narcolepsy, then it's very hard for you to get the drug, just as if you
or
have
a driver's
ADD.
license, or epilepsy.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that's controlled.
A member of my family has ADD and takes Focalin, and it's a controlled substance.
That's an amphetamine, so they've made it controlled.
And so we have a problem every single month. You can only get a 30-day supply. You have to go in twice a year physically and stand in front of your doctor and have them reassess whether or not you need it. So the physician who's trained and authorized and legal to write the prescription does all that they're supposed to do and writes the prescription. We take it to the pharmacy, and the pharmacy says, well, we don't have any of that medicine. And we say, when are you going to get it? And they say, well, we just don't know. And we say, well, how come this happens? And they said, the FDA has decided that too many doctors are writing prescriptions for this, and so they are restricting the amount that can be produced. So I don't understand that.
That's not the power of government. That should be the power of your physician. Your physician should decide if you need it, not that if it's too many people.
I don't care how many other people in America are taking it. if my physician, with whom I have a personal relationship, says I need it, then I don't think the FDA should be saying, well, we only make 1 million of those a year, and if you're not in the lottery for that 1 million, you don't get it.
That's right, and that's going to be more and more of a problem as government gets into medicine. But what started our conversation for today is that we were made aware of a Senate Bill 959. Okay, so in the United States Senate, a bipartisan bill, so it's both Democrats and Republicans, and it's headed up by Senator Harkin, who's been in the Senate forever. He's a Democrat from Iowa, and he's actually helped me in the past when we had a discrepancy between what doctors were paid for women's procedures versus men's. And so by law, by Medicare law, men's procedures, doctors who took care of men, were paid more to take care of them than to take care of women. Like a prostatectomy a prostatectomy is the same skill, the same time commitment, the same risk,
Right.
the same probably about the same number done in the United States as a radical or a complicated hysterectomy.
Okay.
But they were paid twice as much. So a urologist would be paid twice as much as a specialist in GYN cancer would be paid. So that wasn't fair. So I spent months collecting all of the discrepancies in like procedures between men's procedures and women's procedures. I looked through what's called the Federal Register, which has a teeny tiny writing. I had to wear glasses to read it. It's not like reading something else. And I sat every night in front of the television.
Do you need a prescription for those glasses?
Yeah,
by the way?
I do. So not really, get them at Walgreens. So
Go get the cheaters from Walgreens.
So I looked these up. I put them in a spreadsheet. I called all the senators I could find that were in Missouri. No one would talk to me. So I found out who was head of the money for Medicare, and it was Senator Harkin. So I called his office, and luckily I found a woman who was his aide. And she talked to me, and she goes, "Oh, this is really interesting. He was head of the accounting department." Who knew? And so that's the money. I mean, the money for the U.S. So he's in charge of how it's distributed. So I talked to her. I told her the problem, and she said, "Fax it to me." I sent her all of the information, and then I got a letter back from her saying he's taking this to the Senate, and he's going to look at it, and he's going to go into committee and take it to his committee. And it turned out that the following year, or it took a year to happen, but the following year they evened up what was paid for both women and men's procedures that were equivalent. So one human being can get a hold of the right person and explain to them what's going on. No one else in the world but a doctor who does one procedure and understands what another procedure is and then can compare them could possibly tell them this. That's the problem with government deciding medicine, because they don't all have 8 years of medical degrees. There's only a few people in the Senate that do, or in the House. So this is a very difficult concept unless you find the right person at the right time with the right power.
Right. And so part of the reason that we're having this conversation is to say we are not anti-government. We're not saying the government doesn't have an important role in this and doesn't do good things. We are anti-confusion.
And we're big pharmaceutical companies that are fighting with each other through governmental agencies.
Well, let's come back to Senate Bill 959.
Senate Bill 959.
If you get a copy of it and read it, and you can go on the web and download it. You can go to the Senate registry for bills and download by number, or you can go to Senator Harkin's committee page. Either go to Senator Harkin or go to the U.S. Senate Health Committee, and it'll come up, and you can download the bill. And you read the bill. The bill is 55 pages of legalese, subparagraph 1A-C, except in case of paragraph 9 of page 24 of part 2, says, with the exception of paragraph D of page, so you read all that stuff. And
although we could read it, and Phyllis read it, and she got it. I mean, his wife read it. She's a teacher, and she gets this. So people can read it. So don't get dissuaded. It's just difficult. You kind of have to look for the highlights.
And there's much in it that is good and that needs to be. The concern for the bill arose initially because of the meningitis outbreak that was a result of unsanitary conditions at one compounding pharmacy. And so the concern about that and about the inspections and the procedures and the follow-through for compounding pharmacies is a legitimate concern. There are already regulatory requirements in place. And
the FDA comes in and should be inspecting them like they inspect meat packing plants. They do that as well. They
did not do that in this pharmacy.
Pharmaceutical companies.
Right.
And they look at compounding pharmacies. The one that I use is always inspected, and they're inspected for cleanliness, their sterility, they're inspected for whether the dose is what it says it is.
Sequence and procedure.
And the procedure of what they do, and they walk the FDA through all this, and they are always passed. And if there's any small item, then they fix it. I mean, they have to. This is something that happens in all compounding pharmacies, or should. But the FDA is being spread out too thin. They're they're looking at everything now, and they don't have enough people to do it. So this fell through the cracks.
Right. So as a result, 55 people died.
And it's not that every pharmacy, I mean, just like the physicians, most compounding pharmacies are following the rules. Most compounding pharmacies are reliable. I mean, I've used compounding pharmacies for hormonal replacement since 1986. I've never had a non-sterile piece of pharmaceutical material in any way.
With all due respect, you are small potatoes for
I
what
know.
for what a
understand that.
compounding pharmacy does. I mean,
I know.
they supply most of the medicines to hospitals.
Right.
Because the major manufacturers don't have that relationship with the specific hospitals to provide the supply.
Or it's too expensive, and they're looking for price costs,
Right.
price decreases. So your hospital uses compounding pharmacies, but
Especially cancer drugs.
yeah, and cancer drugs as well, because cancer drugs are paid for at a level usually by Medicare, because people who have cancer are generally older or are under Social Security and younger, like children. So generally, what Medicare will pay for a cancer drug is lower than what the pharmaceutical company charges for it. So no doctor can actually pay more than they get paid back to get that drug. So oftentimes that doctor or hospital will go to a compounding pharmacy to make a similar or almost similar drug.
Right.
It can't be exactly the same. And they do it, and then that's cost savings. So in a time when we're cost saving, we're now saying, oh, we're going to give you 1 million regulations that say that you really can't make that drug and make money. It's going to be so difficult for you to produce that drug that hospitals are going to have to not provide services. That's what happens when things are too expensive. Doctors or hospitals stop doing it because they are a business and they can't survive without monetary compensation. The issue really here is it's a good idea on the surface. Every bill has a very altruistic reason that they give the public that they're putting this through. And this bill is to save lives and on the surface, is to save lives and keep people safe. However, if you read it, underneath all that, and that's a great thing, underneath all that, it says that the head of the FDA has the power to just say a compounding pharmacy can't make that drug anymore, at all, anywhere in the United States. And that's what, I mean, I use compounding pharmacies for testosterone for both men and women, and I've never had an issue. And this is something that might, in a day, stop everything that I do for my patients and for myself. And I personally can't live without testosterone pellets.
Well, and if it does stop it, and just like the letter from DEA,
DEA
threatened to stop it in a day because there was a bureaucratic procedure that they were now going to apply that was a surprise to you, and for which you found a workaround.
I found a workaround for it,
But
that was legal.
It could have
legal.
been disastrous. So
And my patients would be, I mean, we're asking my patients to write to their senators and congressmen about this bill, not about the good parts, but about the power to just take a drug off the market for no apparent reason except they don't like compounding pharmacies.
Well, that's not what's said in the bill.
I know, but that's what's meant in the bill.
We're going to have a follow-up conversation about this bill. And in that conversation, we will talk to you about how you can contact your senator if you are interested in doing so, and why we think you should do so, and how to go about doing that. The point of this conversation, as it always is, that it's so important for you to be aware and to be a participatory, informed consumer for your own healthcare concerns. But also in a democracy, you have to, being aware and being participatory means that you sometimes have to take the opportunity that is afforded to you to vote for candidates who support your positions in these matters, to contact those candidates or those elected officials and make them aware of your opinion and your concern. So if you'll come back for our next conversation, we'll tell you exactly how to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Email your questions or comments to podcast@biobalancehealth.com. You can find the BioBalance Healthcast on iTunes and on YouTube. For more information about bioidentical hormone pellet therapy and other reverse aging solutions, visit biobalancehealth.com or call 314-993-0963. You can find Dr. Maupin on Twitter at Dr. Kathy Maupin and on Facebook at facebook.com/biobalancehealth. Find Brett Newcomb at brettnewcomb.com.